Okay guys, we're going to get started on the next session, which is certifications and skills. And a lot of what we're going to be doing here is is feeding on the information that Lorraine presented to you yesterday in the corporate startup and freelance tracks. A lot of what certifications are is a testament, a physical testament to something that you already know, okay? It's going to sound a little bad, but in a lot of ways, basically, you're buying a piece of paper that says you know something, and it's not quite the same concept as a degree. In a lot of ways, buying a piece of paper that says you're a project management professional, or like me, you're a certified Scrum developer, sometimes doesn't mean a whole lot more than that you went and bought the piece of paper. You may have been through a class. You may have attested to on-the-job training. What a certification really often mostly does is expresses that you care about what you're doing, okay? That you care enough to, at the very, very minimum, appear to attempt to continue your education, all right? So it's difficult to put, because we've made it very, very clear that you pretty much need a master's degree. To go anywhere, to be promoted beyond the dev lead level, you're going to need to get a graduate degree. And the reasons for it. The certifications, like the ones that I hold, which are Certified Scrum Master and Certified Scrum Developer from the Scrum Alliance, which is the major body that issues certifications for Scrum work. And that is a style of development that is based on agile development. These certifications, I went through extensive training at the University of Washington to get them, okay? I've got another postgraduate certificate in agile development from the University of Washington. These mean more than ones that were given for the exact same certification for somebody who spent 8 hours in a classroom one Saturday and did it, okay? I did something like 120 odd hours of training, group projects, the same kinds of deliverables that we're making you do here. So that could just be samples. I wrote my first Twitter application in the class that I did at University of Washington. A lot of what we're doing here is showing you how to continue to learn. And certifications are a good way to express that desire to continue to learn. Some people view them very cynically. A lot of people think that certifications aren't worth the paper that they're printed on. Often in security research, they're not, because the kind of people that need to buy certifications to say that they're good hackers, there are not polite words that the other hackers use to describe them. You end up in a situation where you're trying to buy credibility. That is not a good way to approach this. The best way to approach it is as a demonstration of your continued desire to learn more about your field. And in some cases, it can be extremely useful to provide a side of you that is more well-rounded than you already are. I would not have been repeatedly over the last several years hired as a dev lead, team lead, technical project manager, the CTO. These kinds of positions are available only to people who have management training, okay? I demonstrated that I wasn't just somebody who programmed for a living, but also cared enough about learning how to manage people and manage them well that I would go and take a class and spend a hell of a lot of money at the University of Washington and lose my Wednesday nights for a year, okay? This is a demonstration on my part in many ways of good faith, because really what are they going to teach you in a 3-hour class on Wednesday nights about managing people? You know, in a lot of ways it's the same thing that has happened here. We have given you all this information, but it really is up to you to learn, to continue to grow your skills, to build your network, and to use this information in the future. So really what I was doing was expressing that I was willing to learn how to be a manager. And again, oh yeah, thank you, sorry, I always forget this thing. I was willing to express that I was willing to learn how to be a manager and demonstrating that I could complete something. A lot of people use certifications as a way to make up for the lack of a degree. In many ways, that can work. In only one field that I have seen, which is security research, which is hacking, okay? Only one that it really actually can do something, and often that's only in a corporate environment. If you want to get hired as a security researcher in the corporate environment, you do have to have some kind of piece of paper saying that that's what you are, okay? And that's just to check the box at human resources. Just like checking the box for the master's degree means that you've got the advantage over somebody that doesn't have that box checked. Okay, so specific certifications and the things that you need to know for individual career tracks. Very new fields tend to not have certifications. There's nothing out there that says that I'm an Android developer on my resume that's a piece of paper. I am an Android developer, but the field is so new that there is not, as of yet, a truly recognized body that can certify me as an Android developer. I could do something like, oh, so actually here's an example. So I sit, as Bill knows, and Lisa knows as well, on the Information Technology Advisory Board for the for y'all's program, actually. So which is how I know these folks. And we had what I would never ever dare to describe in public as a knockdown dragout over the definition of a mobile development certification. What does that entail? What does it mean? And so I'm sitting there going, my God, you have to have more coding classes. And they say, well, there needs to be some of these skill sets that you need to have in the certification too. And I said, why? And they said, well, because you have to demonstrate that you can do all of these things. And so I'm not right, they're not right, neither one of us is wrong. We're simply saying that the certification means a little something different to each one of us. And that's the same thing that's going to be running through the heads of the people that are going to be evaluating the certifications that you create. That's a mobile application development certification. It doesn't mean anything to me in my career. I could get the certificate from them, and the only thing that it would really do is demonstrate that I wanted a certificate to prove that I want to be an Android developer, okay? Honestly, I mean, I'm not probably going to learn too much, in the 101 classes in Android development because I've already written 5-10 of them, right? So, but that doesn't mean anything in terms of the need to check the box. So, in very new fields, which are often the most lucrative, the most exciting, the ones that you want to jump into, there's no way to get a certificate, okay? I think does anybody know if there's any iOS certificates out there? I don't think that there are any truly meaningful ones yet that I know of, specific to, yeah, okay, good. So the exciting stuff, there's not really a way to show that yet, but as a newbie coming into any of the major fields like web development and software application development and network security, there are good certificates to get. The ones we've often talked about in network security, you almost can't get some jobs without the necessary Cisco certifications. The CISSCCP 1743, 42, I don't know. There's 17 letters behind your name, but those certifications are needed for a network engineer position. As a web developer, you can choose to go get certifications to show that you can do JavaScript, any kind of Java servlets. You can get those from Oracle. There are a lot of development certificates in Oracle available, who now owns Java. You guys learn a lot of Java, I think, at the base level and at Seattle Central, don't you? Okay, yeah. That's what I thought. A lot of good certificates out there in Java. The major reason I picked up those Agile certifications was because I was stuck in my current job, okay? I wasn't gonna get the responsibility, especially, let's be honest, as a woman, to do a lot of managing unless somebody could check a box on a sheet of paper that says, I have more training as a manager than the other candidates that are available. What you're doing is giving somebody an excuse to give you what they already want to give you. You are not letting someone prevent you from being given something that someone wants to give you. Am I expressing myself well there? You're making it easy for someone to hire you for the thing you want to do and the thing they want to hire you to do, okay? So real certifications, let's see.
I have one thing to add to that.
Oh, yeah.
The GI Bill does cover certifications.
Yes, it does.
That is an important piece of information. The GI Bill covers certifications.
Huge, big thing. Oh, and also, your corporation may cover your certifications.
Yes, if you start a company, you can apply for a state grant for education. And the state will give you money to go take a class or get a certification.
Wow. Good.
That's the state of Washington.
And
yes, okay, and also the larger company that you work for, maybe entry level, probably has an education grant or a program that you can apply for matching funds to go get your own certifications. Employee improvement programs. If you can get people to pay for your certifications, there is no earthly reason not to go and get them. Put as many letters behind your name as you possibly can.
Some of them are incredibly expensive.
Yes.
The ones that are the ones that get you the best paying jobs.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to go spend a lot of money on getting an Oracle certification, you are going to get paid a lot of money when you get that job.
Oh yeah, that you were going to be a top-level network engineer. It's going to be worth your what, $18,000-$19,000 now?
I'm not even sure. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But you can get companies to pay for this, and the company that's paying for it, it might actually be the state paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
Any company can apply for these grants.
Mm-hmm.
Also, for things that you are interested in that don't offer certifications, this is back to going with open source.
Mhm.
You have examples that you know how to work with it.
Mm-hmm. Your certification is your GitHub code library. That is you're showing them that you can do it. So, and just like I've demonstrated before, if you are going to assert that you're an Android developer, there's no certification that says you can do that. There's the fact that you can download Android applications that say you can do that. Okay. What was the thing here I was going to say? What was that?
Question. So
Yeah.
we talked about the UW certification for user-centered design, the master's certificate.
I know about that. Yes.
So if I got an LLC, or
Mhm.
if I established a corporation
Mhm.
that had one employee, but was established, I
Okay.
could apply for Washington State grants for that certification.
Liz knows this, but I think it's yes, right?
You can apply. I'm not gonna guarantee that you'll get it.
Sure,
But you
sure,
can
sure.
apply.
Yeah, and then can proceed after that year to pay out of my own pocket for the degree.
Or apply again.
Apply again. Get more.
Well, no, you said certification, but if I continue on to get the master's degree, I would need to pay the difference.
Well, you would.
This is an
Well,
education grant that they give
Oh,
out.
okay, I
Okay,
thought
yeah.
you were talking about specific that are designated as certifications.
No,
I
no,
didn't
no.
understand that.
it's education grants that are being made available to people within companies.
Gotcha.
The state has a lot of interesting programs that can be available for you. And again, Liz knows much more than I do about that specific piece. But yeah, you can keep
Gotcha, my
applying.
brain's locked in certification. Thank
No
you.
worries, no worries. Okay, so, oh yes. You have seen Liz and Lorraine and me kind of put on our best show over the last day and a half. We have performed, we've shown you what, where you want to be in your certifications and in your training. You don't want to do that. What you want to do is expose your ignorance, okay? You're there to learn as much as you possibly can. If you have to sit through the class, learn something, okay? In my Agile classes where I was learning the certifications and the testing needed to get those certs, I said I was going to actually learn some of the things that I needed to understand to be a manager. You guys have gotten some of the benefits of that over the last couple of days. That means that I wasn't acting in those classes like I am now. I sat there and I bullheadedly asked questions again and again until it pissed people off. I engaged in conflict with people that I would not normally engage in conflict with. I pushed people for explaining to explain their answers. I engaged in some social engineering while I was there.
You're telling us that's different than you are now?
I want to point something out here.
Yeah.
These certification classes, it's very common that they'll teach the test.
Yes.
That's part of why she did that.
That's
So if you want to
absolutely right.
learn beyond what's on the test, you have to ask questions.
Exactly. Yeah. So the reason I was pushing that hard, the reason I made them do things differently than they wanted to, is because they were dull-eyed people repeating the same things again and again and again, and I needed to learn something from them. Sometimes the only way that you can do that is to engage in pressuring them to give you more than they are, okay? This is part of a skill of learning, and it meant that I came away with fewer fans than I normally would from that engagement, from that situation. I still have some people that I work with and talk to. We've recommended each other on LinkedIn and stuff like that. Their recommendations of me often look like, Tara will push through to the end of whatever it is that she needs to do, or Tara won't let anything stand in her way to get to the answer to the the end of the question. So that's often what they're going to say, because it's the nice way of saying, she wouldn't shut up until somebody told her what she needed to know. But expose your ignorance there, okay? That's the place where you need to test out some of the things that you want to use in your corporate life, but maybe don't want to experience the consequences for that test in your job. Does this make sense? Yeah.
How much corporate experience did you have before going into this? Because that gave you the questions, right?
I had, I think, 2 straight years of hardcore corporate experience. I had a great deal of academic experience, which here substituted for the understanding of what it's like to operate within a hierarchy where you couldn't necessarily, where you can't always get what you want, and you need to push very, very hard sometimes to get what you need. So the twin structures of corporate America and academic America often function very similarly and often have a lot of intertwining happening. So I can say that I had 2 years of hardcore corporate experience, but what I actually had was a decade and a half of an understanding of how a large, unfeeling organization works and how to work your way through it. Okay, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right, what are the next bits and pieces? I'm actually skipping over rather a lot because one of the skills that I wanted to mention here is contracts negotiation and salary negotiation. We're going to talk a little bit about the bits and pieces of it in just a second. But here is your 10 minutes on salary negotiation. And part of the reason it is so small here is that this is such a huge topic that to do more than give a brief overview here would do nothing more than not provide you with any real training or information and only make you think you understood the situation. Does this make sense? So I'm going to do this briefly and treat it as a skill. This is called certifications and skills, and that doesn't just mean the pieces of paper. I have never in my entire life, when someone has offered me a number for a salary or an hourly wage, said, that sounds pretty good. The only thing that ever comes out of my mouth is, that's not what I was expecting to hear. But I mean, it sounds like an okay starting point. Okay? It's not conflictual. It assumes that it's a starting point, shows that you expect a negotiation. Okay? But it also has a take-back moment of, wow, that's as good as you guys can do right now. I mean, it's going to take us a while to get to a number that I can live with. Okay? I can't do more right now than to tell you that right here, this minute, the minute when they say a number, this is minute 0 of the gender disparity in pay. Minute 0. This is the first time it truly happens. And the reason why is women say, that sounds pretty good. And men say, are you kidding me? All it takes is the difference between those two reactions, and you have the point in time where the 81 cents on the dollar happens. Okay? Yeah.
Do you think it's when women say, you know, it's a good starting point, or they start to the negotiation right there, do you think they're viewed differently than when men say?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Without hesitation, they are viewed differently. This is another one of those places, is maybe the place, where I've emphasized again and again that you have to be okay with people not liking you.
Mm-hmm.
If these guys are walking out, and you, again, it is highly likely that you will be having this conversation with a man in tech. In many other industries, you'll be talking with HR when it comes to establishing your pay rate, because it's going to be a very simple calculus of what is my, years in field, what's my degree, so here's the band of my pay rate, where do I fit on the scale? All right, I'm at 60% right at the moment, and I have rights for COLA increases year after that. That's very regimented. It's very predetermined. That's not what happens in tech. There is a huge band of pay that is going to be available to you, and they're going to try to pay you as little as they possibly can. If they can get this, corporations don't care that you're going to get paid less than a guy for doing the same job. They may care. There's a human there that cares. But the corporation itself doesn't have the responsibility to pay you more because they like you. They have the responsibility, the legal and fiduciary, and that's a serious word here, the legal and fiduciary responsibility to pay you as little as possible, to get as much work out of you as possible, to return the greatest amount of value to their shareholders. You are not their stakeholder. The shareholders are the stakeholders. So, are you okay with not being liked? Are you okay with the fact that the person isn't going to like you when you walk out of that room? V, are you okay with the fact that somebody's not going to like you when you look at them and say, you need to do better than that?
If you asked me 2 years ago, yes.
Okay.
Because
What changed?
It was a cultural thing initially, because
Mm-hmm.
they wanted this social harmony thing. But I think after
Mm-hmm.
working in teams and realizing that, people don't have to like you in order to work with you,
Mm-hmm.
I had to change that view. So
That is the perfect answer to this question. People don't need to like you to work with you. But the gentleman that you're going to be negotiating with does need to respect you to work with you. And if he walks out of that room going, God, another sucker, stop and think about that for a minute. Seriously, stop and think about the fact that you're going to get $45 an hour, and the guy that just walked in ahead of you is getting $60 an hour for the exact same job. You okay with that? Are you okay with it enough that you're going to not challenge it? Seriously, I'm asking the question. are you guys okay with it? Do you need the job bad enough that you're okay with taking lesser pay for the same job?
Well, it's actually very interesting that you say this because I feel like two things are going on. I feel like companies have the upper hand in the negotiation right now because the job market is so shitty. And they can say, you're too much of a pain in the ass, I'm gonna rescind the offer and give it to someone else. And so I think it is a little bit of a slippery slope, not just female-wise, I mean, across the board, you have to be, I think there's a fear on the part of the unemployed.
And I think you're deeply wrong, and you know
Okay.
why? How many of you guys think that I am easy to work with when it comes to salary negotiations? That I'm the person that you want to sit down across the table from when it comes to negotiating money? Anybody in here want to do that? I've never had an offer rescinded.
Okay.
I walked out of every single one of those meetings, sometimes with the guy saying, I'm sorry, we can't meet your amount. Because I had a base level that I could take to do things like commute 2 hours a day. Just because you're never going to give them the number doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have one in the back of your head
Okay.
that you're never going to take less than. I've walked out of those meetings before with them saying, we can't meet that, but I've never had somebody say, you're a bitch, get out of here. So, and believe me, I've pushed them hard again and again and again.
You want to know what I've had happen when they turned me down for my asking for more money? I got offered tickets to Vail.
Really? When did you go to Vail?
I did not go because
Uh-huh.
I took something else instead.
Really? Okay. So.
This
then
is
you-
a negotiation.
Yeah.
Money is not the only thing at stake
Yeah.
here.
That's a
There
good
are other
point.
things.
Mhm.
If you want, I've negotiated for parking passes.
Mm-hmm.
I've negotiated
Bus
for
passes.
bus passes.
Mhm.
This is stuff that's valuable to you, but it's not money, and you're not going to get taxed on it.
That's awesome.
You do get taxed on something like tickets to Vail, but if you get transportation covered by your company, they don't tax that.
Once they offer me shares.
It
Holy
depends on
God,
the
that's what I
company.
mean by money. Shares is money.
Well, you wouldn't be applying for a
look at it.
company that you didn't see a future for, right?
Right.
Did say what?
Did you see a future in the company?
Oh yeah, it's just that I wanted to work for another company. Even but they were calling the bigger manager, the last one, what do you want? Do you want more? They want shares?
If they offer you shares, ask them what they're worth. You have to know what you're getting. You have to know
Actually-
what the company's worth.
Don't walk into that meeting without knowing what the shares are worth.
Yeah, they're not gonna know, but you know, you can get that information later.
There's a basic number. I always go with the stock ticker or whatever.
Make sure you talk about contract negotiation too, as far as hourly on contracts.
Which one, just the hourly rate or the overtime?
Can I start on this?
Go,
side?
do it,
Okay.
because you know what you're talking about.
How do you figure out what your hourly rate is
Oh, yeah.
when you're doing a contract? We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but we didn't really go in depth.
Salary.com,
Yeah.
you look at jobs being offered there where they post salaries, you look at salary.com, Washington State posts their average, although they don't update it consistently enough, but you can find the going rate in your state,
Mhm.
in your region, on what the average
On the hourly
annual
basis.
salary
This is for
is.
contracts. Do you wanna know how I figure out what my contract rate is? I keep upping the number until I stop getting offers.
That is the greatest answer I've ever heard, Liz. Mhm.
You wanna get as much as you're worth, that's how you do it.
That is exactly how you do it. So nobody is going to, plus nobody's going to call you up for a job that they're paying half of what your expected rate is.
Right.
All right.
Exactly.
So I want you guys right now to take a guess at what my rate is, right now. For this is not for day-to-day work, but my rate for consulting, for showing up and telling you what you're doing wrong. What's my rate? Take a shot. I'll tell you the truth.
$90 an hour.
120.
$250.
Yeah, I was gonna say
That's so expensive,
Wow.
$250.
I get paid $250 an hour. You know why? Because that's the number I put on my card.
Oh.
This is an arbitrary number, guys. This is an arbitrary number that you're saying that you're worth. And if somebody pays it to you, that's because that's what you're worth to them. You know what eBay is, right? It's the world's greatest way to tell what something you're holding is actually worth, no matter what your mom thinks those old Briar ponies are worth. Okay? So you are worth what someone's willing to pay you. You are not worth you plus your issues, plus your medical problems, plus all the stuff that you're dragging along with you. You are worth what somebody will put on a check and send to you every 2 weeks. That is it. That is the only answer to this question. Keep asking for more until nobody offers you a job anymore. That's how much you're worth. And then get better and ask for more.
You're almost up to anesthetist pay.
To what now?
Anesthetist pay.
Anesthetist. Oh, an anesthesiologist. Yeah. Okay.
So one of the best things that has come out of being at Seattle Central was the career planning class that Bill and his wife Sarah teach. And Sarah said to us, and I will never forget this, this was like the light bulb. She said, you are in the catbird seat. you actually are in control in that salary negotiation. It doesn't seem like it, but they are gonna be looking at, interviewing a bajillion people, are gonna be offering different people jobs, but you do have the choice, you have the power, it's right there, and you get to decide whether you want that job, whether you want, if they can't pay you what you know you're worth, you walk. And it's that simple, and it might seem different because, you know, I've been unemployed for a long time, but I'm eager to get back in the workplace, but I also am not gonna work for less, you know, I had a massage license for 10 years. You get paid for what you're worth. That's your time. That's your time. Time is money, and it's never felt truer.
And you also get paid what you ask for. Final note before we start heading into our next speaker is this. It's not personal. It's just business. Not even just business. It's business, not personal. Separate the two in your mind. The person that you're walking into that negotiation with doesn't need to like you. You'll never talk to them again. You're not negotiating with your boss for this number, okay? You're talking to somebody who's a bean counter. You're talking to the CFO, probably in a small startup. You could be talking to possibly the boss of your boss, so somebody like the CTO, okay, or maybe the VP engineering, somebody along those lines. They are the people who are handling the budget. And once a decision has been made that you are the right person for the job, it takes a lot of institutional weight and time to change that decision, and it's just easier to give you the extra $5 an hour. All right? That is where your play is. That's where you have the control, because you know how long and how much effort it takes to switch. It's not like they walk into that salary negotiation with you and say, if she doesn't take $81.50 an hour, then I'm pulling the next person in here in 10 minutes. That's not what's happened. You have been the subject of an exhaustive and extensive review behind the scenes if they're talking about numbers at this point. And once that's done, they don't want to change their mind. They want to give you the extra $5 rather than deal with it right then. That is your power, and you have much more of it than you think you do. All right? So, okay, can you make it really fast?
Yes. What if, let's say I hypothetically accepted a position and they're paying me $50,000, and then I'm having a contract renewal and I want a higher salary?
Just assume you should ask for more than you think you should ask for. Would be a good place to start. Okay, folks. So our next very distinguished guest speaker, you'll remember her from the lovely contracts you have been signing, actually, in order to participate in this seminar, is Anne-Marie Mara. Anne-Marie is a contracts attorney and business attorney in the Seattle area. She's spectacular at what she does, and she's one of the pickiest people that I've ever met in my entire life. Oh my God, Anne, who cares? God, it's just legal stuff. So Anne-Marie is a member of Soma Law Group. She is a partner there and a distinguished attorney who has helped me on more than one occasion avoid some very serious legal problems. I have paid her a lot of money before to find a problem for me, which I knew was there. It was there. And guess what? You guys are going to get to see that contract. All right? You're going to see a contract that she saved me from once that it was pretty nasty. You're going to see some contracts and some of the stuff that corporations will dream up to protect themselves. But really, when you read them, you are signing your life away, and it is bad news. She's going to help save you from that, and we're going to answer some really serious questions about it. Before anything else happens, Anne-Marie's going to give you some comments about the situation in IT contracting, and Anne-Marie Mara is going to basically rock your world right about now. There you go, Anne-Marie.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Now I'm going to have to live up to all of that. So, she's very correct in that she tends to send me her contracts and I look them over, and mostly the contract negotiation is, again, like salary negotiation, something that could take days and weeks and months and the 3 years I spent at law school to go into. So we're not going to really cover that today. We're going to cover a couple of minutes of intellectual property and things to look out for, so that when you walk out of the next job that you have, you're leaving with everything that you brought in with you. So there's two contracts that are going to be coming your way. One of them is going to be a more comprehensive employment contract, and the other one is the contract that Tara was speaking about that is just protecting intellectual property. So I'm not sure how much experience you have with intellectual property, but just a brief overview. There's 4 basic types. There's copyright law, which protects creativity and written work, so that also currently covers code because you're writing it. There's patent law, which covers inventions. There's trademarks, which covers branding and logos, which you're probably not going to deal with unless you start going on the creative side. And then there's trade secret law, which is something that that has value because it's kept secret. So whether that's something like the recipe for Coke or the 17 spices in KFC or Microsoft's code, that's something that actually has value because it's kept secret. You can also protect trade secrets longer than you protect patents. Once you apply for a patent, it goes into the public domain, and you have protection for 19 years after the date of application. After that, anybody can use it. With trade secret, you can essentially keep it valuable and you can keep it proprietary indefinitely. So the contracts that you're going to be getting are probably going to talk about trade secret or confidential information. They're going to talk about inventions and invention assignment, and then they're also going to probably cover something called work made for hire or working as an independent contractor. So the one that is called the Subcontractor Master Agreement, that is a more general employment agreement. It covers a lot more than just the intellectual property transfer. And there's a couple of clauses that you'll want to look out for. One is intellectual property, and then the one directly after that, which covers confidential information, I believe. So there's a couple of words you're always going to want to look out for, and one of them is assignment, and the other one is going to be reasonable, or reasonable means. When you assign something, you're giving somebody else rights in it. When you license something, they're paying you to use it for a certain amount of time. And both of the contracts that you see will have a section about all of the tools that you're using, all of the software, all the programming, that you have the right to use that, and that everything that you use in the course of your work for that company, you're giving them a license to use for the work that you're giving them. Which sounds a little... So basically, when you walk out of there, they can still use everything that you wrote for them or everything you created for them, which means that you should have the rights to whatever it is that you're walking in with. Where it starts getting a little bit sticky is where it says the company assumes ownership of everything that you create during your employment. You want to be very careful that it's during a set time. So if they give you a company laptop, that's awesome. Only ever do work for them on that company laptop. Be very clear about when you're clocking in and clocking out, because if you have other projects going on, if you have something you want to do on the side outside of your main job, you want to be sure that it's not on company time. Otherwise, they can claim that, hey, you were using our resources. You were doing this while you were on the clock. We get rights to that. Part of the assignment clause or part of the licensing clause in, I think actually both contracts, mentions that they get a perpetual worldwide royalty-free license. They're not paying you extra for what you're doing as your job.
So does it work both ways? So you have a company laptop, you should only do the work for that company on that laptop. But if you do work on your personal laptop for that company, do they now have access to the stuff that you're working on privately?
They could, because that actually goes back into the trade secret part. That when you walk, if you move on to another position, or when you walk out of that company, they can take back everything that they gave you. And so if you've been using company resources on a private computer, they can take that computer back and to strip it.
Okay. So it really is just keep them separate.
Keep them as separate as you can. And this is actually something I had to fight with Tara about. If you do work on your phone, have a dedicated phone for it. Don't have a personal phone that you do everything with. Have a work phone.
What if, this is so fascinating, this is really sticky. So you get a phone for that company, and they don't pay for the phone setup or anything, but they pay for your monthly bill, and then you stop working for them. Where is the line drawn there? I mean, because you get to keep the phone, you paid for it up front, and now you just take
So that one's more of a division in time. Okay. So as long as they're paying the phone bill, then they can claim whatever you're doing that phone with it. After you part ways with that company, then there's also towards the end of the employment contract or the subcontract contract, there's also things that survive. So that after, there's called the termination clause in that one, I think. And so keep an eye out for, in the confidential information and the termination clause, things that survive more than the length of your employment with them. Some of them are going to be non-competes, which are enforceable in some states and not in others. If you want someone to look over your contract before you sign it, there's going to be a pause in the negotiation. for hiring a contract lawyer, usually it's as simple as you know someone who knows someone, or you look online, you look on Avo. Usually what's going to happen is they're going to charge you almost as much as Tarah makes for consulting, with usually a minimum of 15 minutes to look it over. And so each time that you ask them to do something, it's going to be at least 15 minutes that you're paying for. Depends on the person and how much experience they have. If you hire someone out of a big firm, it's going to be $450 an hour. It might not even be a partner or someone really high up. It might be somebody that's right out of law school that they know what they're looking for, but you're getting billed at the partner rate depending on who you talk to. If you go with someone that's at a small firm, it's probably going to be a little bit more reasonable. Our current rate is $200 an hour. If you go with, and then you can also have small firms that have packages, like for contracts drafting for Tarah, when it's something simple that I do over and over again, then it's usually $200 for a simple contract and then hourly for tweaks after that.
Was the $200, is that to go over a contract, or is that to write a contract?
Both.
Both.
You guys want to know if this is worth it? Everybody pull up your email.
So the second contract, the one that's labeled PICA abusive or whatever it is, so that one is just an intellectual property agreement. And that one, I think it's on the second page or the third page?
I think it's the second page. Let me take a look real quick. Here, let me peek over your shoulder here.
So on the second page it has that the contractor is going to be granting all rights and everything that they've ever done and signing all the documents to transfer that to the company, and then if the employee can't be found,
yes,
the company assumes that they'll be able to do it for them.
I'll read it right here for them.
Sure.
Okay. During or after, etc., during or after my service to the company, upon the company's request and at the company's expense, I will execute all papers in a timely manner and do all acts necessary to apply, etc., patents and so forth, for inventions owned by the company under this agreement, and I will execute all papers and do any and all acts necessary to assign and transfer to the company or any person or party to whom the company is obligated to assign its rights, my entire right, title, and interest in and to such inventions, anything that I've worked on their property or on their dime, okay? This obligation shall survive the termination of my service to the company, but the company shall compensate me at a reasonable rate after such termination for time actually spent by me at the company's request on such assistance. Now listen to this last piece. In the event that the company is unable for any reason whatsoever to secure my signature to any document reasonably necessary or appropriate for any of the foregoing purposes, including but not limited to renewals, extensions, re-registrations, continuations, divisions, or continuations in part, I hereby irrevocably designate and appoint the company and its duly authorized officers and agents as my agents and attorneys in fact to act for and in my behalf and instead of me, but only for the purposes of executing and filing any such document and doing all other lawfully permitted acts to accomplish the foregoing purposes with the same legal force and effect as if executed by me. Okay, do you hear what just happened in there? If for any reason they can't get my signature on a piece of paper assigning my right and title in any copyright, intellectual property, trademark, or any kind that I own, I am legally creating a power of attorney for them to sign on my behalf.
Wow.
Now,
That is the worst thing I've ever seen.
the person that drafted that probably thought they were actually doing something really great for the company, because usually what it would come down to is every time a patent is filed for, all of the inventors have to be listed and they have to sign off on the fact that they're inventors. And there's a bunch of case law about one person got left off at Texas Instruments and then they sued later and they transferred the ownership of the patent. So what the company attorney was trying to do was, if they can't find the employee 5 years down the road when the patent application is almost ready to issue as a patent, then the company can sign on their behalf and it's all cool. So that's what they were trying to do, kind of.
We hope.
The other thing is, if you look at the top part of page 3 of that document, there's actually part of your saving grace, and one of the reasons I was saying make sure that you have a division of time, make sure you have a division of workspace, because there is a law in Washington State that that the company can't take your personal property on your personal time and on your personal equipment. So if you don't use the company property to do your personal projects, there's actually a law in place that helps protect that. Just be sure that you're doing it on your own stuff. Yeah?
So we give you this, you circle, item D on page 3 and say this is really not in your best interest, you rewrite it, and then we go back to their lawyer and say, how does that negotiation happen?
That's not what happens. The first thing that happens is you personally read the contract and figure out all the ways that it can be used against you. It is your job first to look through there. That's what I did. I looked through it and went, oh, right, and sent it off to Anne Marie after marking each one of the pieces and every dot and every typo that I saw wrong in that contract. Every one of you needs to do the exact same. First, because you're called a contractor. Second of all, because you need to worry about the fact that a company that is going to hand you a document to sign that is unethical, that is improperly formatted, these are people that are not necessarily going to be careful with the other kinds of work that they do. You need to know that now too to get an impression of the company. But most importantly, so that you understand the issues that are at stake. At that point, then you go to Anne Marie and use her time best and say, see this problem here that I found? All right, this is the thing and the concern and the issue that I have with it. Not just because we're all human. You know, she might miss a typo or an error too, and you want to catch as many things as you can, but also so you understand what's happening, so that you're using her time best and you're drawing on her expertise rather than simply expecting her to be a catch-all, a spam filter.
And sometimes I come back with, yeah, that's standard in industry. You actually shouldn't worry about that much. And then sometimes when you do come back with the redrafted contract, as a couple of you were saying, sometimes it is too much for the company, and they say, you're a little too much work, we'll move on to the next person.
Mm-hmm.
But like she was saying, what are you willing to work for?
Okay.
What are you willing to walk away with?
Yeah.
After the contract negotiation on this happened, after I came back to them and said, this is something that I can't live with here, I can't sign my power of attorney over to you to take my intellectual property away from me. Take a look at all my intellectual property that I attach in Exhibit A. A week after I turned in the amended contract, I was fired. Okay? Which means that they had every intention of using that clause in that contract against me, and sooner or later. All right? So do you want to stay working for them? Let them fire you. Get out.
No, I've had this issue because I have a very good friend who's a lawyer, and she always looks over my stuff and she'll tell me like what it all means, and we talk about it. And I've gone back to companies and said, do you know that this is what this says? And they argue with you. They are really unwilling to change their contracts. They'll let you negotiate on your salary, but when it comes to contracts, they are pretty hard and fast. And so I was just wondering how you feel with that.
The bigger the company, the more solid the contract usually. If it's a smaller outfit, then maybe they got it off LegalZoom and they weren't really sure what they're getting. They just knew that they had to have a contract that had some clauses in it.
I had something here. The other contract, the one that says subcontractor agreement, that one was mine. There is a clause in there that says if the company doesn't get paid by their client, I don't get paid. How do I know if the company got paid or not?
You don't.
How can I prove that they didn't get paid, therefore I don't get paid? I have absolutely no way of knowing that. I went back to the company that put out that contract and said, I can't live with this. I didn't say this, but in my head was slave labor.
Yeah.
It also said that they can get me to work after the contract is terminated for a month. That's slave labor, in my opinion. They came back and gave me a very good contract with a better pay period than I'd asked for. We call it net 15. That means you get paid after 15 days of, you submit the invoice and 15 days later you get paid. They initially had a net 60, and I didn't even ask them to down that, and they felt bad about it. I don't know if it was because I got caught or if they just had someone draft it up and hadn't read it. I don't know. But you can get it changed. You just have to be really specific about what you want and what you can't live with. And honestly, it has to be things that you just can't live with.
You had a
I
question?
had a question. What if you read the contract and like you just look at it and you're like, whoa, what does that even mean? Because sometimes there's lots of technical jargon intentionally put in to confuse readers.
So for that, there's actually, so the Seattle area is really good. We actually have 2 law schools, and the law libraries are open to the public during the library's open hours, and so you can go and actually ask a law librarian if you don't have a lawyer friend who's willing to explain it for you. The other thing is there's a website called nolo.com, and you can actually find a lot of their books at half-price books for a lot cheaper than what they sell them online. But those are also good resources if you don't have a lawyer on tap, or if you don't have the budget to go talk to somebody who charges $50 for 15 minutes. Yes.
Can you speak a little bit to the part of where if you are work for hire and you've already established that you're not going to have anything they can get you with by having a laptop on premises or a phone on premises that they can tap anything to, but do they claim anything that, as I've heard of this, that's why I'm asking, claim that anything you came up with during this period is owned by them because we gave you so much knowledge that you could have possibly have invented something to that degree between beginning and ending of employment, and then extending that period for a certain number of months or years.
Bratz
I've heard of this.
Maybe the Barbie and Bratz things.
Yeah, so this is actually, that's actually a trademark thing. So there's three things that I can speak to that. The first is if you go back and you look at that clause at the top of page 3, there is an exemption if what you're creating on your personal time on your personal property is something that is in the normal course of your ordinary day of work. So if you work all day, I don't know, designing websites for a company, and then you go home and you use a lot of the same concepts or a lot of the same design stuff to create a fairly similar website.
Right.
Trademark violation, yes?
That one would depends on whether it's been launched yet.
Okay, so intellectual property regardless, but classification
Yes.
is copyright then under similar design?
Similar design,
Okay.
overlapping
Regardless, you don't screw it up.
copyright and trademark.
Okay.
Because the confidential information that you're getting as an employee isn't just in the tools and in the codex and the libraries that you're using, it's also the marketing and the release dates and all the other information that people refer to when they talk about inside trading. So
Soft things can be important to a company just as much as hard things are. That's just one of the reasons why you have things like no poaching agreements when lawyers split apart and make new firms. Yes, I know.
Right.
You're not supposed to go and try to take clients from the other people's firms. You're not supposed to do things like go to dinner with them and play golf with them and stuff like that.
you can announce that you're going your own way, and if they'd like, this is the name of the new firm, but you can't actually, you're not supposed to go to them and say,
This is a very serious situation.
Right.
Can I ask you guys, we've been kind of telling you these horror stories. What are you afraid of in these contracts? What are you afraid of having happen to you by signing these things?
The one thing I have seen that reading contracts is mind-boggling. I mean, it's very
Better not be.
lawyerly, but it's confusing, especially when you see your first one.
That's true.
It was working in that field after you leave that company. Similar
Non-compete.
field, working in a similar field. I've seen on contracts where you can't work in a similar field for 5 years.
That is not something that typically happens in tech. And the reason for that is you would never take a job at a company that said you can't design websites again for 5 years after working for us. Your set of skills would become instantaneously irrelevant.
This was about 10 years ago.
Okay.
the other thing is that in the field isn't just tech, it's also the sub-industry that whatever the company works for. So if you're working for Travelocity on their website,
Right.
you'd probably want to avoid, just to be safe, probably for about a year,
Orbits.
Right.
travel websites. But you'd be probably fine working at Google just because they're like that.
I was just pointing that out because
Yeah.
that was the scariest thing I saw on a contract.
The states do have different rules about that,
This
do
is
they
true.
not?
So,
And some of them say you have to be able to make a living.
And some of them are non-enforceable, like California.
Well, just because
So,
it's
yeah,
not enforceable doesn't mean the
It's
company
general.
won't come after you.
That's
If
true.
it's in your contract.
So we're starting to get a little bit further afield, but non-competes are considered enforceable in Washington State, not in California. That doesn't mean if you're working in California and you start working for a direct competitor, but you've signed a non-compete agreement with that company, they still can't come after you for breach of contract, which may or may not, the punishments for that may or may not be laid out in the contract itself. Like, I'm fairly certain that the subcontractor employment had a clause about
The specific
if
industry.
this goes to court, then the loser pays,
Yes.
which is also something you might want to keep an eye on. Also in your lease,
Yeah.
who's paying attorney fees and who's paying the cost of the lawsuit if it goes that way.
A costly thing that once happened to me in a contract was this, and that was an assertion, that was an assertion that before I was permitted to take the company to court, I had to submit to binding arbitration, okay? Before I was allowed to pursue any legal action whatsoever, I was required to go through mediation, and it was going to be binding. It was going to be the state of Washington, and I was going to live with it.
Mediation
So-
or arbitration?
Arbitration.
Okay.
Yes, not mediation. Mediation is friendly and happy and somebody that you mutually agree on, and you may or may not, have to go with it. Binding arbitration is usually an off-duty judge, and that is somebody whose word, it literally is law, all right? That was a bad thing that happened to me once because it prevented me from doing some stuff that needed to have happen, and I'm so not going to go further into it than that. But you guys get the idea. These clauses, things that say, if you look at a contract and it looks beautiful, and it says, by the way, this is a Delaware corporation, so we're going to be governed by the laws of the state of Delaware, and any dispute must be brought in the Delaware state court.
Because they have completely different laws and it's easier.
Because it's across the country and you have to fly there.
There's
Oh, wow.
there's exceptions to that though.
Yeah, that's true.
You had a question?
It was the same one. I had contracts with that 2 year, can work for this field for 2 years.
What about dealings with going through a employment agency like Creative Group, et cetera? In terms of your content and stuff, is it not maybe double jeopardy, but what, have you experienced anything beyond?
So it's not necessarily double jeopardy, but it's definitely double contract. So because you're definitely signing agreements with the contracting agency, and then they are also signing things with the other companies. So whether or not the company has you sign something directly, you want to be aware of what you've signed on as a contractor with that agency, and then see if they may not, because that's something that you're not necessarily privy to, like how much the company is actually paying them to then trickle down to pay you. But ask to see the contracts that they've signed about the intellectual property. Like that is something that you have a vested interest in, but it's also something that the agency might not be willing to share. And to go back to your work made for hire, so aside from the inventions, which is really what that clause, that law applies to and why you need to keep your book separate, also, if you're working as an independent contractor or work made for hire, then everything that they've paid for is considered under their copyright.
That's what I was wondering.
Because generally the person that creates something creative, whether it's a song or a dance or a movie or a piece of written work, the person who writes it down in a fixed format is considered the author, except if it's a work made for hire in the course of their employment, or if they're an independent contractor being paid specifically to create that thing. So if you're a sculptor that's been contracted to create something for an apartment building, or if you're an employee like this, or and I tend to occasionally make mistakes by referring to both of the two, because you're working for the company but you're not an employee, because if you're an employee then they have a legal obligation to do these other things. So if you're an independent contractor, then you have to be in control of how you do your job, which is also, it can be a bit fuzzy. But for the most part, if you're an independent contractor and you're hired for a specific project, the company owns what you're writing for them.
What else are you afraid of? What other questions do you have? This is your opportunity to get a freebie from a contracts attorney, which never happens.
One other thing, there is there are a number of legal aid societies in Washington. One of them is called the Washington Lawyers for the Arts, and they have a twice monthly legal arts clinic. It's mostly for art-related things, but it's also for small businesses, where you would go into Seattle University during the school year, and then I believe it's held at University of Washington over the summer, and you pay. They ask for a donation of $20 for the time and for the materials, but you get a half an hour of an attorney's time. You usually get 2 law students, and they'll look at contracts for you. They'll do all that stuff. You sign up with, I think it's thewla.org. Yes.
Understand that the $300 that I paid in Maria to take a look at that contract for was some of the best money I've ever spent in my entire existence. And I'm including a pair of used Dolce & Gabbana shoes that I found on eBay. But this is some serious stuff, because these are the things that affect the rest of your life that you can't get out of. You can't move away from. You can't run away from the contracts you signed, and you shouldn't want to. You're putting your name on something. You are creating an ethical and collegial persona, somebody who's trustworthy and who is capable and ethical, and someone who's forthright enough to ask for what they need and to be careful about the things that they sign, because you're going to uphold your word. You're going to uphold the contracts that you sign. You're not going to try to get out of them. You're going to make sure they're okay for you before you put your name on them. All right?
And the other thing about contracts being, mind-numbing and full of legalese is a lot of them are, but then a lot of the clauses are standard between contracts. So if you get familiar with a clause about arbitration, or if you get familiar about a termination clause, or if you know where to look for the clause that talks about getting paid, whether the company gets paid or not, then you'll be able to catch the words that jump out of the page at you. So you can skim a lot of the stuff that isn't going to be as important, and
Well,
just
you can.
well,
It's
sorry.
terrifying to me to do that.
After about 5 or 6 or 100,000 contracts, you can do that.
You know what they're going to say in some places, but I don't yet still. I mean, I think I probably read deeply, meaningfully, not more than 200 contracts that I've ever signed in my life. So.
Well, the other thing, how many of you actually read the EULA when you install new software?
I know you didn't, because I just watched you click right on through in that Eclipse install that I was hooking you up with. Exactly.
The click wrap.
At
Yeah.
most, I'll read like each heading and see if anything, stands out. Yeah.
You're signing the contract.
They can
Yeah.
collect my information.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I read those. I know where to find them if I need to look it up later, besides after the installation screen.
Do we have one final question for Anne-Marie?
She
before
had
we
one
go?
over there.
This is kind of silly, but I heard that my company makes you sign a non-compete on your way out. Can I laugh in their face? Or?
So it depends on what you're getting in return, because the whole thing about contracts is it is someone is giving something and someone else is giving something back. So if they're having you sign a non-compete, what's contingent on that? Is it so that you get your severance package? Is it so that they don't? Well, actually, they can't block your name.
I don't think they're giving me a severance package.
If it's just part of their standard operating procedure, you can tell them to go screw.
Okay. Okay.
Don't ever do things because it's our policy.
I mean, in
If-
Washington and
Somebody says
Oregon.
that, worried.
Worry,
Right.
Oh, it's
yes.
just policy.
If you won't be getting some benefit afterwards, after you sign it, then think about it. But if they're saying like their manager won't,
Only one exception to that. If they're saying we're going to fire you instead of laying you off if you don't sign, they can't do that, as far as I know, right?
that's a part of employment law I'm not as familiar
Is
with.
it really? Okay. Well, I think they can't hold it over your head that you have to sign a non-compete, or they'll prevent you from collecting unemployment. I think that they can do that. I'm not sure. Oh, they can do that, can't
So-
they? Oh, dude.
Some companies do like to avoid paying out unemployment. So depending on how someone is leaving the company, if unemployment insurance is going to be an issue, that would be something to ask an employment attorney. I'm specifically an intellectual property attorney.
Because I
But-
thought if you're fired, they don't have to pay it, but if
You're laid off.
they
Yeah, you
do, or if you quit, obviously.
This is a little bit more complicated. It's also really not in Anne-Marie's purview. I go to another attorney for employment law. So, but yeah, no, these are some amazing questions. I will tell you this, the number one lesson you should be coming away from here is read the contracts.
Right.
Mark them up with red pen and ask questions about the things that you don't understand. If you see something that looks scary, it's scary.
If
Not
they're-
just maybe, but is.
If they're giving you a 7-page contract, ask for a little extra time to look it over and to have an attorney or someone who has contract experience look it over.
Never
If they're
They're
giving
giving
you
you-
time would a company typically give you for that? Like a couple days, or just 24, 48 hours? Or?
Tell them you won't have it back to them within 48 hours because your attorney's gonna have to look at it tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's the response I always give. Okay.
That's for all contracts.
All contracts, yeah.
Okay, I was just making.
Can you find
Did you
an
have
attorney
them-
that fast?
If you have one on tap, yes.
I still have you on tap.
Yeah, you do. I get emails at 11 o'clock at night. Can you look at this before Monday? Like, just a minute.
Thank you.
Here.
All right.
I
So let's wrap it up real quick because we got to get over to the restaurant.
had a
So-
really quick one on
yeah.
open source licensing. What's your
Sure.
opinion as a developer?
So, open source licensing can be great. You'll want to be sure that when you're reading that license, it doesn't say something about, like, so there are some, I think it was the GPL2, that you can make it proprietary. So depending
New public
on,
license. That's what she's talking about. Look it up if you don't know what she's talking about. It's important to you.
yeah, and I also had to read those for my master's program. Those were fun. So there are some open source licenses that will remain open source whenever, and so on that I believe it was your contract, there's a list that says, please disclose all the inventions or everything you're bringing to us.
Mhm.
And so you need to disclose the open source software that you're using, so
And
that
the
they need to
licenses you're
know
under, yeah.
what you're using that other people can then point at for the software. Microsoft had a problem with this recently. And which portions of their code are going to be open source. Or potentially open source, because like I said, there are some that the libraries can be made proprietary afterwards, but the code itself cannot.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Anne Marie has been amazing. Folks, you've had a chance to get your fingers into some of the more scary parts of being a contractor and being on your own. This is the kind of thing you have to look at day after day, week after week, and you know more than you did, but you don't know enough yet. Read your contracts, all right? Anne Marie is a stunning attorney in the area, and I rely on her deeply to keep my butt out of hot water a great deal of the time. So thank you so much for helping them out, Anne Marie. I really appreciate it. All right, let's go get some food, guys.
Thank you to our Kickstarter backers, Michelle Thigpen, Annabelle Richard, Tech Liminal, and Adria Richards. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank all of our Kickstarter backers. We couldn't have done this without you. Thank you.